Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about CowSwap today, or more importantly, about the underlying trading mechanism that is powering CowSwap today. That mechanism is based on batch auctions, and it is what we think a key mechanism to prevent maximally extractable value or minor extractable value at the protocol layer. So the title of this talk is how we can fight the MEV crisis with batch auctions, one cow at a time. My talk is structured into 3 parts, roughly. The first one, I'm going to talk about what are the pain points of decentralized trading today. I will then segue into the core ideas of Gnosis Protocol version 2, the underlying mechanism behind CowSwap. And then, in the end, talk a little bit about how we apply that mechanism in practice today with our trading UI that we called CowSwap. So, pain points of DEX trading today. If any one of you has tried to make a trade on-chain in the last 6 months, you might have noticed that transaction management these days is really, really hard. We hope that this will become better with EIP 1559, so choosing the correct gas price might be easier after that, but right now it's still extremely hard for a retail user to decide what gas price to pick. And we ran a little study on Uniswap trades where we basically checked for a given trade in a block, how much gas did that trade pay, and how much gas did the cheapest transaction in that block that had roughly the same complexity, roughly the same size as the Uniswap trade had. And with that, we figured out that the average user today is overpaying their gas fee by roughly 11%. Doing this yourself is quite hard, so choosing the correct gas price is hard. If you were to say, well, I'm going to lowball my gas estimate and I'm going to take a slow or just a low gas price, then you're running into problems that the prices that are on-chain are changing quite frequently. Markets are volatile, and so are the best execution paths that you can use for your trade. Let's assume you're using a DEX aggregator and you want to trade USDC for ETH. We ran a study that for a size of about $10,000 US, we checked how often does the best execution path change basically within, well, what is the interval in which the best execution path changes. And depending on the current volatility, that turned out to be somewhere between 15 seconds and 1 minute. Meaning that if you sign a transaction today, or at some point in time, and then it sits in the mempool for about a minute or longer, it's pretty likely that it's no longer the best execution path, and there's even some chance that the transaction may fail after all because the price will have updated. And so what you need to do is you need to set a quite lax slippage tolerance. You need to be willing to trade not at the price that was shown to you in the UI, but potentially at a worse price. And this problem is amplified for multi-signature setups even more, because there you are guaranteed to have a delay between authoring the transaction, trying to decide what you want to trade, and actually sending it. If it's just a multi-sig that you control, it might be a couple of minutes between the time that you can get all your devices together. But if you're a distributed team in different time zones, there might be a couple of hours until all your team members have signed. And if you're a decentralized organization that maybe needs to go through a vote, there can even be days from the time that a transaction is proposed to when it is executed. And so the price changes in this time frame make it really hard to make sure that you're getting the best execution. And then the last point I already hinted at, if you're not setting a lax slippage requirement, if you say I want to have a really tight price and a really low gas price, then you run into a very high likelihood that your transaction might end up failing. And when we have gas prices like we had in the beginning of May or at the end of last year, a failed transaction can cost you easily $100, $200 for nothing. And in our case study, we found that about 18% of Uniswap trades and about 10 to 15% of DEX aggregator trades were failing, and that was taken in some 1 week in January. So the key takeaway, transaction management for retail users is really hard. The second problem with DEX trading today is MEV. Minor extractable value, or how it's coined more recently, maximally extractable value. And I'm sure most of you know how what MEV comes from, where MEV comes from, but I'm still just going to briefly describe it again. The core reason why we have, at least in DEX trading, MEV on Ethereum today, is that the execution price of your trade depends on which index within a block your transaction is mined. So we took just a random block from Ethereum, from mainnet here, and we dissected it, and we found that there are 5 trades on the same token pair, Ether YFI. Most of them were on the same protocol even, but all of them have a different price. Some of them have a slightly different price, but there's even like a significant price difference in some of these trades. And now, of course, as a user, you look at this and you say, well, I would like to get the best price of them. Can you please put me in a position where I'm receiving the best price? However, this is not up to you to decide. The miner has the ultimate control over how to assemble trades within a block, and you can be sure that the miner doesn't put you in the best spot that is best for you, but instead the miner will add transactions on his or on her behalf into the block composition to make sure that they can extract as much value as possible. There's 3 kind of classic examples of MEV that I'm just briefly going to repeat here. The first one is called front running. One example of front running would be, for example, a smart contract hack or a very heavy liquidation where somebody was able to buy a Dapp position at a discount. Basically, any transaction that gives you some value, gives you some benefit. A miner might see that transaction, in this case it's TX3, and the miner might say, well, instead of you getting the benefit, I want to get it. I'm just going to create a new transaction that goes in just before yours and snipes away that opportunity from you, in which case your transaction is likely going to fail. Another example, which is maybe more relevant to everyday DEX traders, is called backrunning, which may happen, for example, if you're not using a DEX aggregator, but you're doing a $10 million trade, or even a $1 million trade on SushiSwap, you're going to change the reserve price of the SushiSwap pool quite significantly, but the reserve prices at Uniswap and Balancer and what other AMMs there are on chain are going to remain the same. So someone, a backrunner, has an incentive to come right after your transaction and basically take that arbitrage, make sure that all the AMMs on-chain have the same reserves and show the same price. In which case, your target transaction would be succeeding, but there's somebody that goes in right behind you and tries to take that arbitrage away. And then kind of the meanest case of MEV is what we call sandwiching, and that comes from the fact that today when you place an order on Uniswap, you might think that it's a market order, but in reality it is a limit order where you control the limit price by the slippage tolerance that you are setting in the UI. And if you're, for example, saying that you're willing to buy ETH and you're willing to buy it with a large slippage tolerance, maybe something like 3 or 4%, then this means that a miner can actually go in just before your transaction, raise the price of ETH to your limit price, to your maximal pain point, then execute your transaction, which might, if it's large enough, rise the price of ETH even more. And then the miner would basically reverse their initial trade and sell that ETH, put the price back down, and because they've bought low and sold high, they likely have made a profit. MEV is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. This graph is taken from the Flashbots team, which is a team that is doing tremendous work in democratizing and visualizing MEV, basically making sure that we as a community understand the problem and start reacting rather than thinking like, oh, well, as long as nobody exploits us, we are fine. We can keep building protocols that are prone to MEV. And on this graph, you can see that, well, in the year 2021, we've seen kind of an exponential growth in the amount of value that is being extracted from traders by miners. But not only in numbers, also on Twitter, you can see various celebrities complaining either about MEV or asking how they can invest into MEV protection projects, or even the CoinDesk article was suggesting that, well, why don't we start suing mining pools that are registered in jurisdictions which don't allow market manipulation, because, well, at the end of the day, miner extractable value could be seen as market manipulation, and so we could try to sue them. Of course, this is not what we want to do. We are not in the business of suing anybody. We want to build technical solutions to this problem. And so as a community, I would say we've found 3 layers on which we can attack or trying to minimize or prevent MEV. The first one is the blockchain base layer, so Ethereum as a protocol in itself. And there have been various proposals on how we can prevent MEV at the base layer. But our take on this is that if we look, for example, at EIP 1559, these kind of changes are likely to take years before they come into reality. We have built such a good protocol that everyone loves, and we're kind of reluctant to make changes. And MEV is there today, so we think we need something that not only relies on a blockchain that might not have MEV, but also a mechanism that is minimizing the extractable value. The second layer, which is where I would see the Flashbots team, for example, is saying, let's leave Ethereum as it is, but let's build additional infrastructure on top to allow, well, in this case, it's basically what Flashbots is doing is creating a new communication channel between the traders and the miners, in which you can say, well, I'm not only just telling you I want my transaction included based on a gas price, but I'm actually attaching a condition. I say I will only pay you if some condition is met after my trade has gone through. So it may be that I'm not failed, or an arbitrageur might be saying that I only pay you if my arbitrage opportunity was extracted. But so it's not really changing anything on the mechanism. It's not really changing anything on the blockchain. It's just an additional piece of infrastructure to, well, more effectively, in a way, communicate between the traders and the miners. And then we have the application layer, which is where we also see our protocol, CowSwap or Gnosis Protocol. And there are some other projects on this layer as well. But we think we need different market mechanisms, different trading protocols today, so that the amount of MEV that is in the system can be reduced. So let's talk about how we can achieve this with Gnosis Protocol. One step back to the transaction management is hard slide as a problem. There's the first, one of the first principles that we need to agree on, that we need to achieve in order to have a better trading mechanism, is we need to stop people from signing executable transactions where they're saying, here, I want to trade on Uniswap, and giving these transactions directly to the miner via the public mempool. Because those trades are very likely to contain MEV, and if you're giving them via the public mempool to the miner, we have seen that they will maximally extract you. They're not acting in your best interest. They will just try to get as much out of them as possible. So what we need to do instead is, instead of signing an on-chain executable transaction, we just sign a message that is saying, I'm willing to trade this token for that token at a specific price and maybe with a timeout. And then we can give that signed message to a third party, a professional third party, which in other systems might be called a relayer. In Gnosis Protocol is called a solver. And that professional party will do the trade execution on your behalf. Now you might ask, so how am I guaranteed that the solver is acting in my best interest? Well, first of all, there's a longer lasting relationship between the user and the solver. If the solver was misbehaving, the user would just not use the service. But on the other side, at least in Gnosis Protocol, solvers are also bonded with basically a stake in the system. And most of the malicious behavior that we can see today are actually provable after the fact. You can pretty much look on chain and you can see, oh yeah, I was screwed by the miner here. And so if you have a solver that is bonded, we can have a protocol that slashes or penalizes misbehavior and pays any damage that has been occurred back to the user. And maybe just by itself, the Delegated Trade Execution model already has a bunch of advantages. First of all, the trader does not commit to a concrete execution plan. The trader doesn't say, I want to go to Uniswap or I want to go to SushiSwap. The trader just says, I want to trade A for B at that price. And this allows the solver to make adaptations to that route at the time that your transaction is executed. So if we are in a very volatile market and the best route changes frequently, the solver can decide, well, what we thought 30 seconds ago was the best route is no longer the best possible execution, but I found another execution which still satisfies your limit price. And this is super valuable for multi-signature wallets, but even for regular users, because the solver can retry your trade again and again, even if the underlying route changes. The second advantage for traders is that you only pay if your trade gets executed. Sending this off-chain message, just the signature, is free because, well, signing something doesn't cost you any gas. And when a solver executes your trade, of course, the solver has to pay for gas. But that only, well, basically, the way that the solvers are incentivized is that from your trade amount, basically from your proceeds, let's say, they can take a small fraction that you sign beforehand. Here's the amount of my buy token or the amount of my sell token that I'm willing to give to the solver that settles my trade for me in the case that it goes through. So you only pay a fee if the trade is executed, and you can pay your fee in a token that is different than ETH. You don't need to own native ETH in order to be trading via Gnosis Protocol. And that's a super nice experience because, well, you don't have to sell your precious ETH. It feels like it's a gasless trading experience. And we feel like this user experience is actually much better than the existing sign and pay for your trades with ETH. Now, at least in the single trade execution model that I just showed before, there is the drawback that it is slightly more expensive to do this execution because we now have to verify 2 signatures. We have to verify the base layer 0 Ethereum transaction signatures, and then we also have to, inside a settlement contract, verify that your intent actually comes from you, that you've authorized our settlement contract. And so there's just a little bit of gas overhead that makes trading slightly more expensive in the case you're all by yourself. However, the second cool part about this delegated trade execution is that you don't have to be by yourself. Solvers can now aggregate multiple intents to trade together and settle them all atomically in one Ethereum transaction. And this in itself might already give us gas advantages, because when, let's say, 2 traders are trading against Uniswap, today they would be in 2 separate transactions, 2 separate calls into Uniswap, 2 reserve updates, and this would cost, well, more gas than if we would bundle them together and just do 1 invocation into the Uniswap pool. So just by batching users together, we can, in this model, even be more gas efficient. The other cool thing that aggregating user orders together allows us to do is that the solver now has, first of all, control to apply certain soft rules on the matching that it wants to do, but also that it can use the balances of each user to trade them peer-to-peer rather than settling them with on-chain liquidity. And so this is kind of the second core principle of Gnosis Protocol, which is that all our trades are settled in batch auctions with uniform clearing prices. Now, just to maybe recap again, where does MEV come from? MEV comes from the fact that today in Ethereum you have a block with multiple trades on the same token pair, and they trade at different prices. And then you can see some searchers or miners that come in and try to buy the pair at the lowest price and sell it at the highest price, and basically assemble their trades in a way that maximally benefits them. And this kind of mechanism, where you have a kind of first come, first served time price priority, comes from traditional finance. And in traditional finance, it makes a lot of sense because we have a continuous market. And when something happens in the real world, we want to incentivize players to update the market price as fast as possible so that we have an efficient representation of all information inside, let's say, the Apple stock price or whatever we're trading. However, on Ethereum, we don't have a continuous system. Ethereum only gives us new information every 12 to 19 seconds when a new block arrives. And when that block arrives, all the information that is included in that block arrives at the very same time. All transactions have the very same timestamp. So applying such a principle of first come, first serve price time priority to Ethereum is, in our opinion, not meaningful at all. And this is why in Gnosis Protocol we say, well, let's batch all trades together, and if they're on the same token pair, they should all get the same uniform clearing price, because there's no advantage in giving them some ordering priority. Just to maybe give a little bit of a more intuition of how batch auctions compare to continuous traded order books. On the left side, we have a continuous order book, and the key here is that, well, you have the bid curve and the ask curve, and they will never overlap. In the moment that somebody enters this order book and says, I want to buy something at a price where there's an offer on the other side, it will immediately settle. The bid and the ask curve will never overlap. They will always kind of almost kiss each other in the middle at the bid-ask spread. That's a little bit different for batch auctions. Because we're collecting orders over time, there might be somebody that is willing to buy Ether for up to $2,000 and somebody else that is willing to sell Ether for as little as $1,800. So there might be an overlap in the bid and the ask curve. And by the way, these kind of auctions are also existent in traditional finance today. For example, the opening auctions at most exchange markets work with such a overlapping order book. And then the best way to clear those is to try to match the demand and supply exactly. So where the bid and the ask curve intersect, that's basically the price that should be chosen to perfectly match demand and supply. And now the key principle of uniform clearing prices is that no matter where you are on the orange curve or on the blue curve, as long as your limit price is satisfied, you will actually be executed at the uniform clearing price. And the difference between your limit price and the uniform clearing price is what we call trader surplus. Just to go back to the example, if you were willing to buy ETH for $2,000 and we ended up clearing the batch at $1,900, we are going to give you a $100 price improvement on your limit price. So for every ETH you buy, you're getting $100 trader surplus. And this is nice because it gives us an objective criterion, a metric that we can use to check how much value are we providing for traders and that we can try to maximize in order to create the fairest mechanism. This maximization now becomes important because the examples so far were in 2 dimensions. You always had like Ether versus dollar. And we think it would already be great if we just had uniform clearing prices on each individual token pair within Ethereum. That would already be a great improvement. But in order to make the mechanism even fairer, even better, it would be nice if we can expand this model not just to 2-sided order books, but to multi-dimensional order books. And let me just kind of explain why this is nice. So one way that you might think about, well, we can just use our 2-dimensional order books, and let's say we have, I think in the example, we have DAI, Ether, and USDC in our block. Let's say a random block is trading these 3 token pairs. We could create the 2-dimensional order books, find the intersection, and then announce this as the clearing prices for each pair. However, that in itself might still bear some arbitrage opportunity. Just made an example there where the price of DAI against Ether is 2,400 and the price of USDC against Ether is 2,500. So everyone that is trading on the same pair still gets the same price. However, you could still enter with 2,400 DAI and then make a nice ring trade to exit out with 2,500 DAI. So there's still arbitrage opportunity in the system. And while it's arguably more fair and less MEV prone, it would be nice to remove that arbitrage and say within a batch we announce prices that are coherent, that are basically arbitrage free. And the way to do this is by saying, well, our prices are not based on pairs, but they are based on a price vector. Basically there's a reference currency, in this case it would be $1, and then we can say the price of ETH is 2,900, the price of BTC something else, and if we now want to check what is the exchange rate between BTC and ETH, we can just do this by building the quotient of the 2 values in that vector. And so what we now task the solver to do, if you remember back to the executed trade delegation, we ask the solvers to take all the orders that are in a batch and to then find a price vector where the trader surplus is maximized over all the trades that are in the batch. Basically meaning that if that price, if your limit price is fulfilling the price, then you would be executed. If it's not fulfilling that price, you're not executed. If you're right on the price, then there might be a partial execution. But this is a very complex NP-complete problem, which is why we think that the solver infrastructure in itself needs to be a competition between multiple decentralized parties where people try to maximize that value that I've showed on the slide before, trader surplus, and whoever solver has the solution that generates the best trader surplus is the solver that can then settle the batch. And this way we can make sure that users always maximize the surplus that they get in our protocol. Now, if I lost you here on that multidimensionally, that's totally fine. I want to now come back more to CowSwap and maybe the more intuitive ways of how we can fight MEV already today. So the reason why CowSwap is called CowSwap is because of this economic phenomenon, which is called coincidence of wants. And maybe the best metaphor for this would be if you're traveling from the US, if you had traveled from the US to Paris and maybe you arrived, well, I guess we're all in crypto, we don't need cash or we don't go to the airport to trade cash. But a lot of old people that arrive from the US and Paris, they go to the exchange bureau at the airport and want to trade their US dollars against euros. And then there are a bunch of French people that will go and travel to the US, and at Charles de Gaulle Airport, they go to the same bureau and they trade their euros for USDC or USD. So what they could do instead is they could just walk up to the line and ask a random person, hey, I have euro, I want USD, do you happen to be on the other side of the trade? And if they found a person like that, they could save this, I don't know, 3%, 4% spread that these blood-sucking exchange offices at the airports take. And this idea is basically what we want to bring to Ethereum as well. So today, if you have in the same block 2 people trading, here it's USDC for ETH, and another person that is selling 1 Ether for USDC, what would happen is they would both trade against Uniswap, for example. They would both pay a liquidity provision fee. I think now it's 0.05%, but it's still a fee that gets extracted from their trade amount. But at the end of the block, the price would have not moved at all. The Uniswap reserves would be exactly in the same place where they had been before. And the only value that this pool was providing is to basically act as a sponge between trades that happen within one block. In Gnosis Protocol, because we're batching trades into a single Ethereum transaction, we don't need this intermediary pool. We can just settle people peer-to-peer directly against one another and save the 0.3% spread. Now you might say, well, it barely happens that people are trading the exact same amount at the exact same time. But first of all, even if the amounts are not exactly the same, we can still match the smaller trade with the larger one, and then use that leftover, the excess of the larger one, to just go and trade with the best on-chain liquidity. So let's say in this example, it would be Uniswap. And also, we don't necessarily have to look at the top-level trade intents that are happening, but we need to dissect the trades into the underlying route that is taken to actually execute that trade. So today, for example, if you're selling a project token for US dollars, most of the time you're going to do a 2-hop trade where you sell the project token first for WETH, and then you sell WETH for USDC. And then maybe there's somebody else who's buying another project token with USDC, and now even though these trades look completely different, if you dissect them into its components, you can actually find a coincidence of want, and you can replace this coincidence of want via peer-to-peer trading, and then you only have to swap 50 USDC against WETH instead of swapping 200 USDC against WETH. And for every dollar that you save settling against a liquidity provider, you save some fee that you're paying for that liquidity provision, and this is basically how our protocol can give a structural advantage to traders and can make prices fundamentally better than, well, DEX aggregators or other systems today. So how can you try it out? How does Gnosis Protocol work in practice? First, let's maybe recap what happens when you're trading on CowSwap today. As we said, you're not signing a transaction, you're only signing a message saying you want to trade token A for token B at a certain price. And then you're broadcasting this message off-chain to our batch order book. And then we have a bunch of solver implementations. At the moment, we run about 5, but we are looking to decentralize this component, have other teams provide solver implementations. We are offering grants, and well, at the end of the day, solvers will receive a payout of the fees, so there should be an incentive for people to become these kind of solvers. They basically listen to our decentralized order book. They just check, well, what are the orders in the order book, and they craft fair solutions, optimizing this trader surplus. They then communicate amongst one another, what is your solution, what is your solution, and the one that maximizes trader surplus is allowed to then report that solution on-chain to the Gnosis Protocol settlement contract. Again, if you misbehave, if you say you have a great solution and then you publish a shitty one, you're going to get slashed. Inside the settlement contract, what then happens, we will first match all the overlaps we found, all the cows, peer-to-peer, and whatever volume is left that we cannot trade with one another, and frankly at the beginning this will be a lot because, well, it's kind of a network effect based protocol where the more traders we have, the more likely those cows become. But whatever is left, we can execute it against the best possible on-chain liquidity that exists. Like we can tap into any on-chain liquidity. It can be SushiSwap, Balancer. We actually have an integration with the Balancer vault that all things considered even, if the prices on Balancer or the prices are similar to the prices on Uniswap, it is slightly more gas efficient for Gnosis Protocol to trade via Balancer. But fundamentally, we are agnostic to the underlying liquidity sources. And maybe just one more word, yeah, the DeFi Lego pieces that are chosen for the access also get computed by the solvers. So the smart contract is a very light contract that basically verifies signatures, verifies limit prices, but the actual logic of how to match things against one another happens in the solver part off-chain. Okay, so MEV protection also was kind of the theme of the talk. Maybe to recap how are trades protected from MEV. There's basically 2 parts of it. The first one is if your trade is part of a coincidence of wants, then you're fully MEV protected because the price at which you're traded is decided off-chain. We're just transferring tokens back and forth. It's a little bit like a 0x RFQ order, and it doesn't depend on the ordering in the block at all. It's also maximally gas efficient because we're just transferring token back and forth. We're not updating any reserves or changing any other AMM state. And there's no LP fee that we need to pay. And so inside this red box, you really have full MEV protection, you have better prices for the users, and you have less gas costs. Now, of course, this only works when a lot of people are using Gnosis Protocol or CowSwap. With everything that cannot be matched inside a CoW, we go and basically search on Ethereum all dexes. We have a solver that is integrated in the 1inch API. We're querying the Paraswap API, Matcha. So we are already effectively a meta dex aggregator that makes sure that even if there's just one trader in the batch, they get the best possible price that is available on chain. And the way that those people are MEV protected is by the fact that our solver is a professional entity which can estimate gas prices much better. It can subscribe to the mempool and watch for race conditions. If the transaction would fail, it can replace it. Or at the moment, we're even working on integrating MEV geth so that we don't have failed transactions at all and are competing with searchers or other people that are trying to extract MEV. But we are, of course, on the side of protecting users from MEV. But to summarize that, even in the case when you're by yourself, it is still a much better protection from MEV than you could have compared to when you're using MetaMask or whatever wallet you're using by yourself today, which doesn't give you any protection. So CowSwap.exchange was initially designed to be a proof of concept. It has gotten quite some traction and we've gotten great feedback. So at this point, I would no longer say it's a proof of concept. It's actually a product. And for us, it's the first trading interface that we've built on top of Gnosis Protocol v2. And you might have kind of seen that under the hood, Gnosis Protocol v2 is really agnostic to where its orders come from. It's really important that it gets order flow, however, because the more orders it gets, the more potential there is for these CoWs to be found, and the more potential there is for users to get better prices. With CowSwap, we started at the status quo of user experience. We tried to see what are the minimum amount of changes we need to make to the Uniswap user experience in order to get people to use this new trading mechanism. And so if you visit CowSwap, it should be very familiar to you if you've used Uniswap in the past. The only difference is when you actually click swap, you're not signing an Ethereum transaction, you're not paying gas for that, you're signing an off-chain message. And in the future, we hope that there are many more interfaces which will send their order flow via Gnosis Protocol, because we hope that these interfaces care about MEV protection for their users, care about that their users receive the best price, and this is something that with Gnosis Protocol we can guarantee well, better than any of the existing protocols that we know of out there. And so here's kind of our roadmap. We have already announced like 2 months ago our collaboration with Balancer. As I said, we have a slight, like our contracts are very, very closely integrated with one another. So Balancer trades have a slight gas advantage on our platform. And also Balancer has agreed to be the second interface for Gnosis Protocol and have people send their orders that they send on Balancer via Gnosis Protocol. After that, we're going to focus on more on-chain liquidity. So right now we are basically integrated with on-chain liquidity via DEX aggregators. So you can trade on Uniswap v3 and whatever other sources there are. However, if we want to find CoWs, we need to employ a different strategy than what Paraswap, 1inch, and Matcha offer today. So we have to onboard these liquidity sources into our native CoW-based solution engine. And that's what's on the roadmap as well. And then, of course, we want to decentralize the solver infrastructure, because at the moment, we run most of them. And so if they go down or if there's a problem, then we don't want to be in charge. We don't want to be in control of this protocol. It should be a decentralized competition. And for that, we offer grants. We offer rewards as well. And that is kind of the third step on the roadmap. And then to close, I just want to kind of summarize our vision of trading. Like if you're a user today, if you're a trader, we think that Gnosis Protocol is a place where traders can come together and try to collaboratively protect themselves from MEV and collaboratively get better prices, because if 70% or 80% of the volume that is currently traded on DEXs today was traded via a batch mechanism like Gnosis Protocol, we could increase the amount of value that gets returned to users dramatically. And so it's a little bit of a network problem, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, but yeah, if you care about being protected and if you care about trader collaboration, then consider using CowSwap or consider integrating Gnosis Protocol. And with that, thank you very much.
So thank you for this. You said that the solver was, so the solver is paying for the fee, and what happens if the Uniswap transaction is failing? Because you said that the trader won't be paying for that.
Yeah, so this is kind of the risk that the solver is taking away from the user, and a professional solver would have to basically incorporate that risk into its algorithm. One way to prevent failing transactions today would be to use MEV geth and to only pay the miner in case your transaction goes through. This is a strategy that a solver might employ. The other one that's maybe 6 months ago would have been the go-to strategy would be to watch the mempool and see, okay, is my transaction still going to be okay even if the current block candidate is getting mined? And if not, then it could just replace it with a transaction that is actually succeeding again. But yeah, kind of we assume that a professional solver can do that much better than the average user. So the overhead or the risk of failure should be much smaller for a professional entity than for you.
How can you guarantee that the solver is actually optimizing for the right thing, since you cannot prove that it actually that the computation is correct?
Yeah, so the thing that the smart contract verifies is that your limit price is met. But you're right that a malicious solver could potentially just match you at the limit price, even though a fair execution would be way better than your limit price. And for that, we have this bond that solvers need to pay in order to become part of our protocol. And it's very easy to solve or to prove after the fact that well, either the solver has lied about its objective criterion, so it said it had the best solution, but then it published something that is crappy, or that it published something even though it wasn't supposed to publish anything because it wasn't the winner of the competition. And if after the fact we can prove these misbehaviors, we can slash solvers retroactively and pay out any damage that has been done, any surplus that has been taken away from the user back to the user with that penalty. So it's kind of, there's a DAO that would run a client that would verify that everything is going fine, and then if there's a violation, then there needs to be like a court case or something like that to say you get slashed.
So I understand you need to sign something and then it takes a while until the transaction actually happens. Is there a possibility to cancel your transaction?
Yeah, so on-chain, every message you sign also has a nonce, just so that we can also not replay your trades. So you could invalidate that nonce on-chain, but we also have at the moment a soft cancellation feature where you can signal to the order book, hey, my transaction is no longer, please don't consider it anymore. And if a solver would then still use your transaction because it's technically the signature is still valid, then that could be another reason for why they could be slashed. But yeah, right now, if you want to go sure, you can invalidate your orders on-chain. You can basically say this nonce is not valid, like never accept any order under this nonce. Or you could use the soft cancellation and signal to the solvers, please don't use my order anymore. So yeah, it's possible, gas-free with a little bit of trust, and non-gas-free, it's possible for sure.
I'm thinking about the dollar cost average project or product, and is it possible to sign now an order which is then executed like a half a year later, and I just get the market price?
Yeah, so it is possible with well, it's not possible on the EOA layer. Like you cannot use your MetaMask to sign an order that is valid from a certain time in the future, but that's purely a limitation that we decided to not take this feature into our first version. It's something that is definitely possible. The way to do that today would be to deploy a smart contract and have that smart contract be your smart order. And basically it would say, my order is not valid before a certain date. And then you could mimic arbitrary logic. You can even do stop loss orders or like arbitrarily complex orders today via smart contract proxies. But not with your MetaMask EOA right now, unfortunately.
Hi there. Work? Yeah. I saw just now that you're available on XDAI. Liquidity. Is there enough liquidity there?
Yeah, so the cool thing about this protocol is that it's not attacking any existing liquidity that is on chain. Sure, if we have 100% of trading volume, maybe we would eat a little bit of Sushi Swap's or Uniswap's lunch, but it would be, I would say it's tiny compared to the value or the increased volume that we could get on Ethereum trading today. So this is more like a layer that is on top of existing liquidity. And so to your question on XDAI, is there enough liquidity? Well, there's Uniswap, there's maybe a few other projects. Unfortunately, liquidity on XDAI is not the greatest, but we basically just eat in any liquidity that exists on that chain. So we are really agnostic to the underlying liquidity.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the talk. What are exciting products you would like to see built on top of CowSwap?
Yeah. Basically, our vision is to have any kind of asset exchange basically be powered via CowSwap or via Gnosis Protocol, the underlying protocol. So one thing that we would like to do in the future as well is to have more expressive orders where you can say, I'm not just trading token A for token B, but I'm trading a bag of tokens for some target allocation. And I might even be able to say that I don't really care which stablecoin you get me, I just want one of these 4 stablecoins. I think in the shorter term, we would really like to see smart contract integrations and kind of what we can get from smart orders, like stop loss orders, these kind of more advanced trading strategies that can be integrated. Of course, we would like to see some market makers integrate with the order format directly. We can source 0x orders, that would work. But we think that we can even be more gas efficient if we take market maker orders in our native format directly. And yeah, but I'm happy to talk also afterwards and maybe brainstorm a few more ideas. We're definitely we have a large community grant fund, so we're always happy to support work on top of our products.
Hi, Felix. You were mentioning some of the results of your own research, the research of your team. Do you have any numbers in terms of what's the percentage of volume that is now on exchanges and DEXs that goes into one block, on the Ethereum block, when, the ones that you're trying to match within the block?
Right, yeah, we did some analysis. I don't think we did it on a 1 block batch time, but we've done it definitely for 30 seconds wait time, so over the course of 2 blocks, over the course of 4 blocks. And we have the data. I can, not sure if we can, but probably you can share it. We're also rerunning it again because we did that analysis in January when we kind of decided to go all in with this project. We're now doing it again to reevaluate how did the last 6 months kind of develop. And the key takeaway there is that we are really relying on order flow and network effect. So you really need to get something like 10%, 20% of all DEX trades on Ethereum to make the amount of volume that gets captured with these CoWs to be a meaningful, to be a sizable to actually give the user a better price. And so yeah, this is also why we have this very strong network effects, but yeah, we need to get that order flow basically.
So you mentioned XDAI and Uniswap. Do you have actual solvers working with sidechains?
Right now, we only have solvers on XDAI as if you consider that as a sidechain. Yeah, we are deployed on. When I mean deployed, I also mean that we have solvers running on these networks. So we're deployed on Rinkeby as a testnet, XDAI as a cheap but incentive, like real money incentive sidechain, and then we have mainnet. We're potentially open to deploying on anything that is EVM compatible, but it's not in our immediate roadmap. But yeah, we are monitoring the space, and if there's a good reason to go on Polygon or some other sidechain, then we're open to that as well.
Hi. Hello. Yeah. Firstly, can you please tell us what incentives would you give to solvers? How are you incentivizing solvers?
Yeah, there's on our forum.gnosis.io, we are currently discussing this as well. There's 2 proposals. One would be we would give a fixed amount of GNO tokens, or if there was a protocol-specific token, the protocol-specific token to the solver that is winning, and then maybe similar to how Ethereum has an uncle reward, we would maybe also give a solution to other solvers that have participated but didn't end up winning, maybe the runners-up, or at least that were in some range with the winning solver. But of course, there's some Sybil attacks and other problems with this. And the other option would be to, the protocol will charge a fee, basically a percentage of either your surplus that we generate or of the volume that you trade, and that fee will be split between the protocol itself and the solvers. So these are the two mechanisms.
And just quickly, you mentioned the grants. Is that something that you can work with a project in terms of like support and implementation into a smart contract, for example? Like, does Gnosis offer support from the internal?
Yeah. We offer support. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I'm happy to talk after on outside. And yeah, thank you.